All right, in demand, consumer surplus, producer surplus videos, D1, D2, and E, we were looking at these two equations, price equals 12 minus 2/3 Q, and supply is price equals 2 plus Q, and we looked at if we are allowed to get to the equilibrium price and quantity of $8.06, we calculated all these measures, total revenue, consumer surplus, total benefit, producer surplus, and variable costs. And so just to review here, in this diagram I have on the right, the orange is the consumer surplus, the green is the producer surplus, the blue is the variable costs, the green plus the blue, this rectangle, is the total revenue, and the orange plus the green is the total surplus, which is $30. And as we discussed, that's the important thing that economists keep their eye on. But I wanted to real quickly run back through all three of these cases: equilibrium, a price ceiling, and a production quota, so we can compare and contrast what happens, because that's really the important part of what's going on here, is to really understand what are we doing and what happens. So we have $30 in total surplus here at equilibrium, and the total benefit is $60. That's the most that somebody would be willing to pay to get the product, and variable costs is $30 to produce 6 units for labor and materials costs. Now let's compare this graph with what it looks like when you have a price ceiling. So let me show you that. Basically, what happens is we have a new area here, this red area. With a price ceiling of $4, people will only be buying the 2 units that the suppliers will be willing to produce at such a low price. So we're taking some of this total surplus, the orange and the green, and we're losing it. It's like we're chopping off the total surplus right here, and that's what gives us this red triangle. Everything over to the right, that part that was going to be total surplus is now gone. It's not consumer surplus because you don't get surplus for something that you don't buy, and it's not producer surplus. It's not money that the producer will have left over after paying their variable costs that could be used for paying fixed costs and for profit. And so this is surplus that we don't have anymore. And with the price ceiling of 4, the total amount of the orange and the green, the total surplus, goes down. It was 30, and now we calculated it in that part of the video to be $16.67 in total surplus. And so this deadweight loss is the amount that the total surplus goes down, and that's $13.33. And we also analyzed a production quota of 2 units. And the reason I looked at a production quota of 2 units is so we could compare what the situation looks like, the result, with a price ceiling of 4 when the quantity supplied will only be 2 units. I wanted to compare that with what happens when the government says, okay, it's illegal to supply more than 2 units now. And the consumer and producer surplus gets decreased, chopped off, by exactly the same amount. This is exactly the same shape of deadweight loss for a production quota as when you have a price ceiling here. So I chose these numbers on purpose because a price ceiling of $4 will have the same result for deadweight loss that you have with a production quota of 2 units. Now, what are the differences? Well, when you compare the two, there are a few differences. One of the big differences is with the price ceiling, the price is $4. But with the production quota, the price is going to be that $10.67, because that's the highest price. If you plug in a quantity of 2, that is the highest price where people will still be willing to buy the 2 units that you're allowed to sell with a quota of 2. So instead of the low price of 4, there is a high price of $10.67. Now, since the consumer is paying a higher price, a large part of this consumer surplus, this orange, that used to go to the consumer. Remember, consumer surplus is the difference between how much the consumer was willing to pay minus what they had to pay. Well, if the price is higher for the 2 units, then the consumer surplus is going to be smaller. Well, who gets the surplus that the consumer loses going between the price ceiling and the quota? The business gets it. If the price is higher, their total revenue is the green and the blue. And if the price is higher, their total revenue will be higher. And after they pay their labor and materials costs, well, let's compare those in these 2 situations. With the price ceiling of $4, we calculated that the labor and materials cost, the blue, was $6 to produce 2 units. Now, with a production quota of 2 units, the variable costs are still $6. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, it's because it's the area under the supply curve from 0 to 2 units. Well, that's got to be the same, but intuitively thinking about, well, how much do you have to pay for your labor and materials costs in order to produce 2 units? Well, it's the same, no matter what the reason is that you happen to be producing those 2 units. So the variable cost stays exactly the same, $6 for each. But since the total revenue to the business is higher in this case, then the producer's surplus will be larger. The amount that you have to go towards paying your fixed costs like rent, and anything left over, profit. So a business's profit would be larger in this case, since the producer surplus is larger for a production quota. So if a business had to choose, which would you rather have? We're going to reduce your the amount you're able to sell to 2 units. You have your choice: a price ceiling that will make you only willing to supply 2 units, or a production quota, and we tell you can't produce more than 2 units. It's a no-brainer for the business. And as with everything in economics, if you close your eyes and you just talk it out, would I rather have a price ceiling where my price is forced to be low as a business person, or would I rather the government tell me that I'm only allowed to produce the same 2 units that I would produce in the other case, but I'm allowed to charge as high a price as I like? Well, it should make sense that a business would prefer that case. Now, to an economist, though, we think that these 2 outcomes are equally bad because the deadweight loss is the same in each case. And again, total surplus is what we focus on, the orange and the green. We want it to be as large as possible because we don't make a big distinction between consumer surplus, which is a good thing for consumers, and producer surplus, which is a good thing for producers. We care about the total being 30. And anything that comes in between, the market equilibrium generating that 30 in total surplus, we think is equally bad. So since the deadweight loss reduces the total surplus by $13.33 here, and also with a quota it reduces the producer surplus by $13.33, these are equally bad. We don't care that in one case the consumer surplus is larger than the producer surplus, but with a quota that the producer surplus is larger than the consumer surplus. Why don't we care? Well, because businesses who benefit from producer surplus are all owned by people in the end, and so we don't make a distinction between consumers being people and businesses being some sort of, Martian invader force. I mean, no, people work for businesses and own the businesses, so we don't make any distinction. It's just the total surplus between the two that's most important. And in the next video, we'll analyze a tax and see how that affects the market.